Greetings, everyone. Thank you to everyone that is joining us tonight, wherever you're tuning in from. We are so excited for this event and this opportunity to speak with Senator Chris Van Hollen. And before we get into all of that great stuff, I'd just love to quickly introduce myself. My name is Gozi Gwanu. I'm actually a Maryland resident. I grew up in Cheverly and currently live in Upper Marlboro now with my husband and soon to be baby girl. I'm due in December. But I have a lot of background in healthcare, and currently that's why I'm a part of Progressive Maryland. I joined them as a member, but I'm also a leader on our healthcare task force. And so my background is in healthcare research and determining some of the disparities that we see in access to healthcare. And so that's something near and dear to my heart that Progressive Maryland champions. And tonight, I'm really excited to just share a little bit more about Progressive Maryland with you all. But before that, I'd also like to share my quick connection to Senator Chris Van Hollen. I actually have a background in fundraising for Waterkeepers Chesapeake. And if you're not familiar with that great organization, they are the coalition behind our Chesapeake Bay Waterkeepers. And so in 2019, I had the distinct privilege of getting to hear Senator Chris Van Hollen speak because we are proud supporters of all the great environmental advocacy work you've done and being a champion for our environment and our clean water. But with that, I'd love to talk to you all a little bit about Progressive Maryland. So if you're not familiar with the organization, they are statewide and they include supporters and members in every county. And they're organizing at the grassroots level for things like universal healthcare for all, environmental protection and justice, including transit, clean water, racial equity, criminal justice reform, policing reform, and more progressive drug policies. They also helped organize for a community-based response to COVID, resources for COVID recovery, worker and tenants' rights, and for more inclusive elections and democracy. Progressive Maryland has affiliates and partners throughout the region that include the labor movement, immigrant rights groups, women's rights organizations, and other social justice organizations. And that's exactly why I'm a supporter and member of Progressive Maryland. They bring together folks like you and I, everyday individuals in the state of Maryland, who are passionate about improving our current state, improving our policies to ensure that we have better qualities of life, but also thinking ahead about future generations of Marylanders. And with that, I'd love to just share a quick purpose of what this town hall is going to be about. We're here to discuss what's in the Build Back Better plan and how it can impact Marylanders like you and I. We're going to spend some time with Senator Van Hollen and learn where we are with the plan. And then we're also going to talk about how we can build more support for the Build Back Better and even more solidarity for the issues that are included in the plan. And just a little bit about the structure of tonight's event. You've heard a few words about Progressive Maryland from me, but after that, I'm going to introduce the senator and you'll get to hear a little bit from the senator, some of his remarks and his perspective. And then we'll hear from a Maryland frontline worker. Her name is Daisha Johnson. We look forward to hearing from her. And then we'll have a quick Q&A with the senator. And we'll wrap that all up with a little bit of words from our executive director of Progressive Maryland, and then we should be able to get you all out of here by 8 p.m. So with that, I get to have the distinct honor of introducing Senator Van Hollen. Senator Van Hollen has been in the U.S. Senate since 2017. He currently serves on some key committees like the Appropriations Committee, the Committee on the Budget, on the Committee on Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs. And Senator Van Hollen began his career as an elected official in the Maryland General Assembly from 1991 to 2003, first as a delegate and then as a state senator representing Montgomery County. He was known for his progressive record and fought for things like a ban on oil drilling in the Chesapeake, raising the tobacco tax to fund healthcare services, money for education and policies to end gun violence. Progressive Maryland gave him its Progressive Champion Award in 2008 for his leadership in Annapolis. From the state Senate, he went on to serve as the congressman for the 8th Congressional District for several years before winning his Senate seat in 2016. I want to welcome Senator Van Hollen and thank him and his staff for their work, especially for delivering on economic support and relief during the pandemic. With that, take it away, Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Well, Gozi, thank you. And thank you for your dedication to all these causes, and congratulations in advance about your exciting news expecting in December, and for your work with Waterkeepers. It's been great to partner with Waterkeepers to protect the Chesapeake Bay and water quality in Maryland. And thank you to Progressive Maryland, and to your leader, Larry Stafford, and to all of you, those who helped plan this evening's town hall, and to everybody else who's in the trenches working for progressive politics and change in Maryland and throughout the country. And I look forward to the conversation we're going to have this evening. The timing is very good for this town hall because, as I think everybody knows, we did reach a framework agreement on a big part of the Build Back Better agenda just today. We still have to get it over the finish line, but there are many really important and I think transformative initiatives here. There are also, I will say, some disappointments, and I will mention those where we're still not giving up, either as part of this bill or over the coming months and years. But as we all know, this very important piece of the Build Back agenda, which focuses on investing in human potential, is a vital part of this bill, lowering the costs of living for families working to paycheck. And this is one part of the two-part Build Back Better agenda. The other part has already passed the Senate. It is in the House as we speak. And that also has some really important provisions for Maryland. And let me just mention some of those. It will provide, we estimate, a minimum of a $7 billion investment in Maryland transit, in helping to repair roads, bridges, and tunnels, help invest in our ports, help build out high-speed internet, broadband, so we can connect every child and close the digital divide. And importantly, and this is a provision I worked very hard on for years, and I'm pleased it's in there, providing federal funds to address some of the fundamental injustices that we saw as a result of earlier federal transportation planning. So, for example, in Baltimore, we have the infamous Road to Nowhere, which divides West Baltimore, which split African-American neighborhoods. And we have funds in that modern infrastructure bill that we can use, and we've already talked to the Secretary of Transportation. Maryland has to apply, but we put this provision in there with the Highway to Nowhere in mind. Also, we were successful, I worked with Senator Cardin to make sure that the Red Line in Baltimore, which was the very important metro project that Larry Hogan pulled the plug on, and with pulling the plug on that, really did a disservice to the people of Baltimore, because that red line is also very important to connect people with work, and was very important for equity reasons in Baltimore. So we have a provision that says that with the next governor we have, that project, the federal funding of that project doesn't have to go to the very back of the line. We're back in the game. So there are many important provisions for Marylanders and working people in Maryland in that bill. In where we announced the framework today, there are some also essential provisions. And I'm just going to mention some, and folks may have questions on some of the details. But I do want to just highlight a couple things. Number one, many of us have been fighting for universal early education for a long time. That's in this bill. Every child, regardless of neighborhood, needs to have access to early education. Right now, both Head Start and Early Head Start are oversubscribed. Thousands of Maryland families who are eligible for those programs can't access them today. And so we're going to do universal early education. Affordable childcare. As we know, this is a vital part of really our infrastructure too, because working parents need to make sure their kids are in a safe and secure place when they're at work. And so this bill provides that no family will have to spend more than 7% of their income on quality, affordable childcare. Right now, parents have to spend sometimes 50%, sometimes more of their income for that purpose. And that's just not fair. It's not right. So that's a very important piece of this bill. We also extend the child tax credit. These are the tax cuts for middle income and lower income families. As a result of this provision that we put in the American Rescue Plan, we've cut child poverty in half, but it would expire at the end of this year. And we have continued that for a longer period of time. I wish it was even longer. I can go into the details on that provision if there are questions. Also, for seniors and people with disabilities, one of the big issues we've got is not being able to provide affordable care in your home and essentially forcing people into institutional settings. This has a very important provision to help people get healthcare in their homes and pay those essential frontline workers. And I want to thank all the essential frontline workers who've been out there putting themselves at risk throughout this pandemic. Thank you for what you're doing for Maryland. This will help provide pay increases to those workers who are helping people, seniors and others in their homes, and expand those opportunities. And while we did not get the full expansion of Medicare for everything from vision and dental to hearing, we do have a provision in here for hearing. And I can talk more about that as we go forward. On the healthcare front, some very important provisions. Again, the American Rescue Plan expanded the premium support so that more people would be able to access healthcare through the Affordable Care Act. The goal, in my view, ultimately is to build toward the Medicare for all, but this is an important step. Those subsidies were going to go away in 2 years, and those have been extended now. So no family will have to pay more than 7% of their income for premiums on healthcare. And then there's some important housing provisions, which I've been working on for a long time as well. And on climate, there's a $550 billion big investment here in clean energy, energy efficiency, and very importantly, targeting funds for environmental justice purposes. And I'm happy to go into those details more. This is paid for by closing tax breaks for multinational corporations that have been shipping their profits overseas, hiding their profits in places like the Cayman Islands, shipping American jobs overseas. It includes something that I've worked on for years, and I'm pleased to report it was beefed up in the final version of this bill. It's called a millionaire surtax, and it says if you're making more than, if you're making millions of dollars every year, you need to be doing more to invest in the success of everybody else. And there are a number of other provisions like that. So it's paid for, and it's not just that we're generating revenues, we're improving the tax code. We're making it more fair, more equitable. So all of that is in there. Disappointments. So far, we're still fighting. We've got to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. I'm also very disappointed that the paid family leave provision is not in there. And I know we're going to hear from Deshu Johnson in a minute. The good news is we have much more affordable childcare. On the other side, this is a provision that we could not get all 50 Democratic senators to support. And we're going to have to come back. I'm part of a bill. We've been working for years to try to get this piece through. So those are some of the disappointments. Let me end with this. As we work to the Build Back Better agenda, it's got some ways to go to get over the finish line. We've also got to save our democracy. And that means passing the Freedom to Vote Act. It means passing the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. I think everyone knows that to do that, we've got to get rid of, either eliminate or amend the filibuster. I'm for getting rid of it. And that would also allow us to vote on other important measures like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and some other important provisions that passed the House. So, but in the interest of time, Gozi, let me end there and look forward to our conversation this evening.
Thank you so much, Senator Van Hollen, for your remarks and all of the great work that you put into the framework, the Build Back Better framework thus far. We will have time for questions in just a few minutes, but first I want to welcome Daisha Johnson to share her story. Thank you so much for being here, Daisha, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to Progressive Maryland for having me speak today and to Senator Van Hollen for giving us his time. My name is Daisha Johnson. I live in Maryland and I'm an operations manager at Well Paid Maids, the DC area's only living wage home cleaning company. We have been around since 2017, currently have approximately 20 employees, most of whom live in Maryland, and we were recently voted Best Maid Service in the Washington City Paper's Best of DC competition. We serve Maryland, DC, and Virginia. All our employees make at least $20 per hour, and everyone receives a full benefits package, including 22 paid days off per year, health, dental, and vision insurance, and employer paid commuting costs. In my job, I hire, train, and manage all of our wonderful employees. Due to my role, I'm very aware of what makes our employees succeed at work and in life and what holds them back. I'm also very aware of what helps the business grow and what creates obstacles to our growth. In fact, the well paid Mays philosophy as a living wage business is that those things go hand in hand. That is why I am so excited about the parts of the Build Back Better bill that address the dire need for paid family and medical leave, as well as stable, affordable childcare in our country. Regarding paid family and medical leave, I'm confident that having a federal public program will make our business stronger and be better for our employees. Originally, our company provided private short-term disability insurance, which had a very difficult process for claims approval, did not cover many types of leave, and was costly. Since moving to DC's public paid family and medical leave program, our company is now able to provide better coverage at a third of the cost. A federal paid family and medical leave program will give us the same great coverage through a public program, but bring the cost to our business to $0, allowing us to invest more in growth and other employee benefits. Regarding childcare, I can tell you that a lack of access to stable and affordable childcare is currently harming our business. In the last 6 months, almost 40% of our employees' unscheduled absences have been due to a lack of stable and affordable childcare. In addition, of our employees with children, 75% have had to reduce their schedules from full-time down to 35 hours or less due to their informal, costly, and unreliable childcare arrangements falling through. This translates to loss of revenue for our business, less earnings for our staff, and unhappy customers. As a mother of 3 kids, I understand our employees' struggles with childcare and believe that more federal support is crucial for giving working families a fair shot. To summarize, a strong Build Back Better bill that protects paid family and medical leave and federal support to childcare will cut our small business expenses, increase our revenue, and allow us to invest more in growth so that we can create more living wage jobs in our community. Beyond being the right thing to do, these measures are crucial to helping small businesses like ours recover from the pandemic, and I do hope that you will fight for them, Senator. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much again for your time, and Gozi, back to you.
Thank you so much, Daisha. You touched on so many critical and important points that we do need to discuss tonight, hopefully, and we can hopefully get some questions answered. So now with that, I'm going to go over some of the Q&A with the Senator. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone who shared questions with us. We've taken a number of them, and I'll be going through them with the Senator very shortly. Well, and hearing from what Daisha just said, I think one of everyone's mind is childcare and of course the family medical leave. We have, and based on what we heard from Daisha, we have big gaps in our society. And when it comes to the needs Americans have, like the need for paid family and medical leave and for affordable care, Maryland has the third highest costs in the country. The original Build Back Better puts a cap on the childcare costs and creates 12 weeks of paid leave, something that will help workers like the folks Daisha works with. So with that, What are you doing to make sure we keep these two important provisions in the Build Back Better framework?
Well, first the good news, and then the piece where we're going to have to keep fighting. The good news is we have a very strong provision on affordable quality childcare in this bill, and it essentially provides that no family will have to spend more than 7% of their income. I mean, there is an income phase out for that, but ultimately a 2.5 times median income. And the bottom line is for um, almost every working family, for all working families, that there will be this child care payment support from the federal government so that nobody's paying more than 7%. And as Daisha just said, and thank you for sort of sharing your story with us, that is a huge cost for Maryland families and families around the country. And really capping that at 7% of income is a huge gain. And it will mean that families are able to use that income on other necessities that they face. And so we're very determined to get that over the finish line. I'm also, I've been fighting for a long time with some of my colleagues, Senator Patty Murray, Kirsten Gillibrand, other senators and House members on the paid family and medical leave. And as you probably heard, when the president was in Baltimore the other night for the CNN town hall meeting, I was pleased to join him there. We worked very hard to try to save that provision. But we did not have all 50 of our Democratic senators willing to vote for that. And Joe Manchin has very publicly stated that he wouldn't support that, setting up that system in this bill. He did say that he would work with us to, work on that as a separate piece of legislation. So I am disappointed that that's not in this bill. I spoke to him as recently as about 4 hours ago on that, pushing him on that and other issues. But I'm just reporting where we are on today. So a very good news on a very robust, affordable childcare piece and early education. I want to also stress that. But unfortunately, we couldn't get to 50 votes, and we don't have any Republicans. I mean, I do want to remind people we're trying to do this without a single Republican vote in the United States Senate. As much as we would like them to join us, they do not support the kind of measures we're talking about on the human side of the investment.
Thank you, Senator. We definitely hope that we can continue fighting for family medical leave, and we appreciate the great work that's been done in terms of affordable childcare costs. Another very important costly thing that every Marylander may be concerned about is the cost of prescription drugs. And right now, they're crushing families. Medicare should be able to negotiate the prices with pharmaceutical companies, just like the Veterans Administration does. This idea has had strong support for a long time. We need this reform, and it shouldn't be limited to only certain drugs or to certain plans. Will you support getting this measure in the bill? Specifically, what the Ways and Means in committee passed?
So I am for not only giving Medicare the negotiating authority on drugs, and I'm on the legislation to do that. And yes, I support the House passed version, meaning the version that was in the original House proposal, as well as the version that passed the House of Representatives earlier this year. We need to give Medicare the power to negotiate for all drugs, not just a small segment of drugs. Unfortunately, this is a provision that is not in the bill as of this moment. And that's because, and this is no secret, it's because of one of our other Democratic senators, Senator Sinema, has opposed this provision. Now, we're not giving up on this. as the question suggested, some people have proposed to narrow the negotiating authority to a very small class of drugs. And my concern is that if we do just that, people will think they got a big benefit, but they won't have. There is another provision that we are trying to get into the bill that would essentially prohibit any pharmaceutical company from raising the price of their drug more than the cost of inflation. If you look at drugs like insulin, those companies have just engaged in rampant price gouging. And you've seen them, even for a drug that they've had for a very long time, they raise the prices dramatically, way above inflation. And so we are working to try to at least get that limitation in, and possibly have some rebates for those pharmaceutical companies that have engaged in that kind of price gouging. We have to see how many years we can look back on that in terms of the rebates. So we are still fighting this very issue as of this very moment. I had conversations on this a few hours ago as well. The House, just so everyone knows where this stands in the process, the House Rules Committee, as we're speaking, is meeting, unless they've stopped, but I doubt they've stopped this evening. And they still have the opportunity to amend this bill. The Rules Committee in the House can add amendments, for example, on this issue of prescription drugs. But we need to make sure that whatever they put in will pass the Senate, because we have no room for error in the United States Senate. You have to have every one of our 50 votes, plus we'll have the Vice President casting the deciding vote on this Build Back Better agenda. So we are in regular communication with the House and trying to push our members so that we can do more on this prescription drug front. Again, if we don't get everything we want here, we've got to keep. I'm really ticked off about this piece. There's no excuse for not having it, but it just means we need more members in the United States Senate who will vote to ensure Medicare has the price negotiating authority. By the way, we should also allow the reimportation of drugs from places like Canada. Drugs made in the United States are sold at much lower prices in places like Canada and other industrialized countries. And so by allowing those same drugs that were manufactured here to be reimported here, it would drive down prices in the United States.
Thank you for that answer, Senator Van Hollen. We hope that the House Rules Committee works hard to at least get it right, so that we can make sure that this provision is back in there. But we hope that people will get on board and support these efforts to expand this measure. Much of the media coverage has been focused on huge top line numbers that have no real meaning to most people. But most or almost all of the bill is actually paid for, correct? Can you please explain the revenue raisers in the bill?
Yes. So this bill, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that the focus has been all on the number, as opposed to the very important policies that are embedded in this Build Back Better agenda. And we've gone over a number of those this evening. And yes, they are paid for, and they're paid for by making important reforms. A minimum corporate tax of at least 15%. Some of the biggest corporations in the country pay zero taxes in certain years, even while working people are paying taxes. So that makes no sense. These corporations benefit from all the infrastructure and other investments we make in this country, and they need to be paying their fair share. So we have a minimum tax there. Importantly, we also added a tax on stock buybacks. These are things that some of these corporations do simply to give windfalls to all their stockholders, many who are overseas stockholders. And so we did that. And then another two important provisions I want to mention. One, I highlighted earlier, something that a bill that I introduced, which is called the millionaire surtax. And what it does in the form that in the final form is if you earn more than $10 million every year, we have a surtax on top of your normal income tax in this bill of 5%. So whatever your normal top rate would be, it's another, it would be another 5%. And if you make over $25 million a year, it's an additional 3% for a total additional 8% tax rate. So, that applies not just to, the big CEO paychecks, but also to their sales of stock, the proceeds from their sale of stock. And finally, we have provisions in here to provide the IRS with the ability to better enforce current laws, because right now it's mostly very wealthy taxpayers don't pay what they owe in taxes. They have, they hide their income. Sometimes they have, high paid accountants that help them shelter it in different ways. So we provide more authority. So those are some of the ways, but you're right. Bottom line is, through these tax reforms, which we should do in and of themselves, we generate the revenue to make these really important investments in families and workers and seniors.
Thank you, Senator. That was actually one of my follow-ups, was about how are we going to be taxing these corporations and making sure they pay their fair share. So appreciate that inclusion of those provisions. One of our questions is coming in regarding Medicare expansion. The healthcare industry tries to scare seniors about what it means to expand Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing coverage. They say seniors can afford to pay for private plans to get this care, but we know that thousands of Maryland seniors can't afford to pay for things like a dentist appointment and basic checkups. When people can't do preventative care, it can lead to other serious health issues like heart disease. Do you support expanding Medicare?
Yes, and these are important provisions. And Senator Sanders has legislation on this. I'm a supporter and co-sponsor of his legislation. And if you look at the current Medicare system, it has these big gaps in it. And they include gaps in vision coverage, dental coverage, and hearing coverage. And in this bill, we have included the hearing coverage piece, and we're going to have to come back and fight for the other parts. Again, this is something that I was actually talking to Senator Sanders about. Obviously, we're all disappointed that we haven't closed these other gaps. For a variety of reasons, they were technically more difficult, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have launched those in this bill. I think we should have. Again, everything's out there in the public domain now. Senator Manchin's view is that we can't be expanding Medicare by more at this time. We disagree with him, and we were able to include this provision. I do want to mention, Gozi, something that is in the bill that I have not mentioned. And while Marylanders fully benefit from the Affordable Care Act, including the Medicaid expansion piece, which covers millions of the Medicaid expansion part of the Affordable Care Act, helps over 1 million Marylanders. There are many states run by Republicans with Republican governors and Republican legislators. People in those states are suffering because those states did not enact the Medicaid expansion component of the Affordable Care Act. My terrific new colleague and friend, Senator Raphael Warnock, has been on a mission here to make sure that we did something in this bill about that, because the state of Georgia is one of those states that did not enact Medicaid expansion from the Affordable Care Act. So we have a provision in here where people from those states will get additional premium support that will allow them to go into the federal exchange and have no premium costs. So, which is effectively eliminating their premium costs in this bill. So that was a important priority of Senator Warnock. He was right. And I do want to mention that because as a result of that, millions of Americans who don't currently have access to that Medicaid expansion will now have access to healthcare.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that piece, Senator Van Hollen. Even continuing on, you already kind of touched on it with the Medicaid expansion. How does providing free premiums rather than medical coverage to poor low-income people help them access healthcare if they can't afford the deductibles and co-payments in the ACA plans? What will you push for when it comes to Medicaid coverage?
Right. So this is a big issue, right? It is important to get the premiums down. And because of our extension of the American Rescue Plan provisions that help provide premium support, you've got thousands of Marylanders who now can get access healthcare who were not because of the cost of the premiums. You're right, though, you still have the issues of co-pays and co-insurance. Now, those are set, there are limits in the different plans in the Affordable Care Act, right, under the different standards. But there's no doubt that that remains an issue. And what we've done in this bill is try to increase families' incomes in other ways. One of those very important ways for families with kids is extending the child tax credit, right? Because that is providing families with kids to up to $300 more per child, right? If your child is 6 or under, it's $300 a month more. For children over that age and to 17, it's $250 more per month. So for families with kids, they'll have more income to spend on whatever their needs may be. And that's a very, very important provision. We're going to have to extend that beyond next year. We kept in, I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here. Importantly, we kept in the refundable portion so that, very low income families will continue to benefit into the out years. But the size of the overall child tax credit piece, we extend for 1 year, and then we're going to have to extend it beyond that again. But the good news is that it won't come to an end at the end of this year, which is what would otherwise happen. So we're looking for a variety of ways to help families save more money in other areas. The child care piece is another, right? By limiting people's child care costs to 7% of income, that will free up other income they've got. We also extended the earned income tax credit provisions, the increased tax cuts for working people, and that's also fully refundable. That's for singles, people who are singles under earned income tax credit. So we have tried to provide a number of mechanisms that give people more money to pay for all the necessities and needs that they're facing.
Thank you, Senator. We have a question here about the Build Back Better principles. Democrats and the president have talked since 2020 about how we need to go big and go bold. The full Build Back Better agenda can do that by making investments in the care economy, in climate action, and a roadmap to citizenship. These investments help millions of people and help us advance racial justice and equity in this country. Do you share these principles and these goals?
Yes, and a very important part of the principles, as you said, goes the Build Back Better agenda is across the board in each of these areas to address issues of social justice, social equity, with the goal of building an economy that does work for everybody. Right now, our economy does not work for everybody. It's not inclusive. We need more shared prosperity. And by essentially, requiring big corporations and very wealthy people to pay more to invest in the success of everybody else, we're pushing that whole idea forward as part of the Build Back Better agenda. And every part of it has an equity component, including, importantly, the climate change piece. There's a provision in here that, yeah, I've worked for years since my days in the House to enact. It's called a clean energy accelerator. It's like a green bank. The idea is that it will be provided funds. It's an independent nonprofit. It will invest monies in clean energy and energy efficiency. And we make very clear in there that 40% of the funds that go into this accelerator must be directed at lower income communities and for environmental justice goals. So that, and there's another provision I worked hard on that's in here for home energy efficiency. And again, that will be helping lower income households save on their energy costs, providing more energy efficiency. So, and I should also mention the housing provision. I mentioned we have about $150 billion in here to both build more affordable housing and to expand affordable housing vouchers, including vouchers that help, families with kids get wraparound services through the affordable housing program. So there's a lot in here that's focused on the goal of directing funds so that we can build that economy that works for everybody and addressing issues of racial equity.
Thanks for sharing that. And one of the things as a follow-up to that is that we know that we're not going to get the original level of funding for this deal, but we'd like to know if you would lead efforts to keep all the programs in the bill so that no one is left behind.
Well, right. There are two things that happened during this process. One is the overall dollar size of the package was reduced from what we originally proposed in the Senate Budget Committee, which I serve on, which was the 3.5 trillion number over 10 years. This package is now estimated to be around $1.75 trillion, which is still a sizable investment, but it obviously falls short of the amounts we'd hoped for. And again, this one piece of the Build Back Better agenda. The other part, the infrastructure bill, has over $1 trillion as well. But on this piece, we were able to preserve many of the programs. However, to do so, we had to change in some instances the number of years they're in effect. Right? Let's take the child tax credit, for example. Over a 10-year period, that of course costs more than over a 1 or 2 year period. So that's true of all these programs. So that what we've done is by shortening the amount of time some of them will be in effect, we've been able to squeeze them into that same number. What this means, though, and what we're very focused on is building momentum around the country in support of these programs, so that we believe the majority of the American people strongly believe in these programs. And so it's going to be important that they elect House members and Senate members that want to keep these programs going in the out years when they expire under this bill. There are, as we've mentioned, some provisions that did just drop out, but that was because we had certain members in the Senate Democratic Caucus who just said they wouldn't vote for anything if it included those provisions. And so we're going to have to come back. Paid family leave right now is in that category. I mean, Joe Manchin has said that's one of those things. So we're going to have to come back and fight for that as a separate bill.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Senator Van Hollen. Yeah, it sounds like we are going to have to keep the fight going for many of these provisions. We have another question that's come in regarding climate change, something very important to me. Thanks for your longtime leadership for environmental justice. Again, we can't thank you enough for all of your great work. Climate change, as you know, is an existential threat. Annapolis and Baltimore are bracing for flooding this weekend. Right now, my county in Prince George's County, the coastal areas are going to be potentially experiencing flooding as well. And the climate-related weather events are continuing to grow. You know how dire the situation is. How are you using your influence inside the caucus to preserve and protect as much as possible of Build Back Better from Senator Manchin's cuts, especially Build Back Better's environmental justice components?
Right. I mean, and you mentioned the severe weather events that we're expecting in Maryland this weekend, and as you say, that's not new here or across the state or the country or the world. And and of course, President Biden's heading off right now to the climate summit. And I'm glad to see us, restoring American leadership by reentering the Paris Accords. And it's going to be very important that we back him up by passing this bill. Now, the good news is the very day he left, we do have an agreement across the board on investing about $550 billion in our efforts to address the climate. And that we are now in the process of finalizing the different pieces of that to do two things. One is to get the greenhouse gas emission reductions down to where we need them to hit the scientific, the goals that are driven by the science and by Mother Earth. And that is cutting greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030 and getting to net zero by 2050. And the resources in this bill, if creatively applied, we think can get you there if you also implement certain actions through regulation, which the Biden administration is working on right now. So you asked the very question that many of us just asked the Biden administration to provide us, to show us how the provisions that we've included in this bill will get us the necessary reductions. I should say I've separately been pushing for something called the Polluter Pays Climate Fund that would require the biggest carbon polluters to put into a fund, just like we have Superfund, right? Where we charge companies involved in the hazardous waste business, and we use those monies to clean up Superfund sites around the country. We've introduced a bill, and Congressman Bowman and I introduced it. He in the House, me in the Senate, to create this polluter pays fund of $500 billion, where we ask the big polluters to pay. That's something we're going to work on going forward. But in this bill, in addition to the provisions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we also do have provisions to address the kind of issues you just talked about, to build more resiliency, especially into our coastal communities, our cities that are experiencing flooding. And those monies are in both pieces of the Build Back Better agenda. There are also some of those provisions in that infrastructure modernization bill to make sure that our infrastructure is built to last, and that we address those issues of environmental justice, because we know many of the communities that are hardest hit from climate change and suffer most from the consequences of climate change are lower income communities and communities of color.
We do. Thank you so much for addressing that and acknowledging some of the issues at hand and how we are going to be able to fund them and ensure that our communities are fighting and getting resilient and building resiliency. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to move on, as we want to be able to get everyone out for the rest of their evening. I'm going to pass it on to our Executive Director of Progressive Maryland, Larry Stafford. Take it away, Larry.
Senator Van Hollen, I just want to begin the process of closing us out by saying thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Appreciate that as much as it is actually your job to take the time, but I do still appreciate your candor and your honesty with what's going on in the Capitol, what's going on in our country regarding this agenda. And I know there are many obstacles in the way, of many of the good things that you and many of us want to see done for the suffering working people of this country. So, there's so much more work to be done. We really hope that you will hold firm to push forward with these agendas, taxing the folks who have gotten away almost scot-free, the very wealthiest in this country, making sure that Medicare is negotiating to lower prescription drug prices, expanding Medicare as well. These are just such important priorities, and probably chief among them all, tackling climate change is going to be so important. And I know that in this current package that Biden has proposed, there's honestly so much in it, but also very much that's missing. And just the last question I probably have for you is, what do you feel like is a bottom line, perhaps, for you, in all of this, with so much going on with these negotiations, so much perhaps being taken out? Is there anything that you could say is a bottom line?
Well, first, let me thank you, Larry, for your leadership as president of Progressive Maryland. And it is so important, as you know better than anybody, to build grassroots support and momentum for the changes. And I want to say this, that what is in this package, in my view, will be transformative. What's in this package will make a big difference in people's lives. And it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there if you and Progressive Maryland and others around the country hadn't been pushing for these things for a very long time. So the good news is the many pieces that are in here. As I said, some of them, instead of eliminating them entirely, what we did was started them. And we started them, and they will now be maybe implemented over a shorter period of time. But the goal is to keep the grassroots momentum building so that we can extend them. I mean, after all, when we passed the American Rescue Plan earlier this year and implemented that child tax credit for families with kids up to $300 a month, we were only able to do it through this year, but now we're able to extend that. So we want to do that. And then, yes, we're going to have to use the movement to come back to get these other very important pieces. We are still working right now, as I said. I think there's still some hope on pieces of the prescription, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, something you've been fighting for, Progressive Maryland's been fighting for, I've been fighting for every year in the Congress. I think it's crazy we don't have give Medicare the negotiating authority to do that. But we're going to have to come back and overcome the resistance on that front. And that means getting more members in the Senate who will vote for that. I mean, right now we're at the edge. We only have 50 votes plus the vice president. So to answer your question, I'm continuing to look through this bill, but I agree with what the House Progressive Caucus members said today, which is that they support this bill in principle the way it is, that they recognize there's some things that we all want, I should say all of us in the progressive movement want, that are not in there, and they'll come back and fight for them. But there is, in my view, enough in here that really makes a huge difference for people's lives. And we're going to still fight. I mean, there are still hours to go. I mentioned the Rules Committee is still working on this. So we're going to keep battling until the very end. But if we can get to yes on this, it also means we get to yes on the infrastructure modernization bill. And when you take those two things together, I really think it's going to make a big difference for working people in Maryland and around the country. Those infrastructure investments I mentioned, and then these investments in in opportunity for every American. So let's see how it goes. The fight's not over even tonight. My understanding is the House is going to come back next week. They're not going to pass these bills this week. And so we'll keep fighting over the weekend.
Pass it back to Gozi to close us out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. With that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers that joined us, Stacia, Johnson, especially thank you for joining us today, the staff at Senator Van Hollen's office, and Senator Van Hollen, of course. It has been a pleasure speaking with you and getting to share these questions and hear your answers. And with that, we're going to, and I can't forget this. Definitely, if you are interested in joining and supporting Progressive Maryland and some of our other actions, there's a link just below. Just click below and you can continue helping and support and volunteer with us. And we just want you all to, if you're interested in getting involved with Progressive Maryland, use that link because we'd love to have you. We are always growing and always looking for ways to connect more of our community to this work. So with that, if there's nothing else, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. And Senator Van Hollen, thank you again.
Thank you, Gozi. I want to thank you and Progressive Maryland, the whole team. I also want to thank my team, my staff, who's without whom I'm not able to, work on these issues. So thank everybody who's gathered here this evening. We wouldn't be here without the good work that you're doing at this point on the Build Back Better agenda. And what it teaches me is that we just got to keep fighting. If there's something not in here, let's just keep at it. And let's also keep fighting to protect our democracy and get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah. Thank y'all. And shout out to all 158 plus people I see in the crowdcast. Sign up to volunteer, sign up to get involved. Link is below if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Peace. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.